been in the SCA for about 27 years or so I'm old. I came to the SCA when I was a professional actress. So everything that we're going to talk about today comes from a theater background. Um, I'm not going to give my whole resume to you because I think most of you know who I am. I know a lot about performing. Let's just put it that way. This class is called Bardic is Storytelling because I firmly believe that everything is a story and everything has a story, and there's a way to tell your story. This class focuses on SCA, but we can talk about modern world performers as well if you feel. Whenever I teach, I always like to say I'm not the most knowledgeable person in the room at any given time. And if you have input and you've had thoughts, please unmute your microphone and join in. So the first question is, what is a story? And the dictionary says that a story is a tale, real or imagined, told to entertain. And I think that we can take out the word tale and take out the word told. I think that songs are stories, dances are stories, vocal music, instrumental music, everything is a story. Even Lucas, you were talking about, you have a speech class starting. Those are stories. Speeches are absolutely stories. And this class, we're going to talk about them and how perhaps we can all tell better stories no matter what focus we use. The first written story that we have is the Epic of Gilgamesh, which was written almost 5,000 years ago in 2700 BC. These were carved into stone. So it's actually a really, really cool tale. If you have some time, I would totally recommend looking them up, giving them a read. So now this is the audience participation part of this class. I want to talk about what makes a good story great. And right now I just want to focus on storytellers. In the SCA, out of the SCA is fine. Like Garrison Keillor is one that comes up an awful lot in the modern world as a great storyteller. So go ahead and unmute your mics. Tell me, who do you think is a great storyteller in or out of the SCA, and what makes them so awesome to you?
Well, I've always liked stand-up comedians. George Carlin comes to mind, one of my favorites. I thought he was the best wordsmith out there at the time and still today. Foxworthy, fabulous storyteller. So, and I used to do stand-up comedy, so that's where I come from. Most of my stories make people laugh.
Anyone else?
I can do one. There are two. One of my favorite storytellers is Master Renraven Foe. And I think, and I've heard several of his stories at this time, and I think it's because of the passion in his tales. Not only, you know, I guess what he has researched, but his delivery is so passionate you can't help but to be brought into that. And another person who doesn't tell stories often is Mistress, whose name I literally blanked on. Mistress Bianca Rosamond. So she doesn't tell stories often, but when she does, it's almost the opposite. It's almost like the story is so intimate, you know, not boastful, not big, not drawing you in with passion, but the story is so intimate you feel like you're in the tale. So those are two that I really enjoy within the SCA.
Nice. Anyone else? Go ahead.
Just raise my hand. I'm used to being in class. There's a poet who used to be a teacher. Is a guy by the name of Taylor Mawley. I don't know if anybody's familiar with his work. And most of his poetry now is story. It's a story, and it mostly comes from when he was a teacher. So he has one called Viking Funeral, which he taught at an all-boys school, and it's all about how one boy in a class of middle school boys had cancer, and how that class went through it. And they built this Viking ship, but all the different projects he does in his class, which again, I like the subject matter too, because, you know, the history and the Viking and whatnot. But it's really the story of these boys. And when the kid lost his hair, all the boys in the class shaved their head. And unfortunately, it doesn't have that much of a happy ending, but it has the uplifting ending, and the Viking ship being burned. And just any like that. But he's funny, and then pulls the rug out from underneath you, and then he's poignant, and then he's crass, and then, you know what I mean? So he kind of runs that spectrum. So I think a really great speaker, but a really good storyteller.
Anyone else? All right, I am going to now excite you so much because I have some videos. And I want to talk, I'm showing you these videos because these are, to me, some really great performances that are stories. The first one's a little long. I don't know that we'll go all the way through. All right, so that's the veil. So I think we can all see where the story is in that. It's one of my favorite songs. Garraed Galbraith, I can never say his last name, Galbraith, performed that. That was down at the Green Dragon Tavern at Gulf Wars. But it's one of the most hit songs on Shavasu's YouTube channel. That story is, to me, one of the best, most beautiful stories, and it's because of his delivery of that story. You want him to get her. You want her to wait, right? She doesn't, but he still goes on, and that's what just, it makes, to me, that one of the best songs in the SCA, flat out. One of our favorites, everybody. All right, so I'm not going to play the whole thing because it's pretty much just that. What is this? There is a story, and one of the things that I like to talk about when we talk about Wolgemut, especially, is it just makes you dance, right? It gives you this feeling, usually of joy. I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm right back at Pennsic, standing outside the pagoda, and eating my egg roll and jamming. But there are people who don't like them. And that's the cool thing about art and stories, is that we all have different things that we love, and there's no wrong answer and there's no right answer. So that Wolgemut performance right there, it's a story, and it's a call and response story. They're playing off each other together, then breaking out separately. And a story can be simply, in the case of that song, just joy. Sharing joy is a story in itself. All right, next one. All right, so that's another story. It's a story of, I don't know anything really about dance in the SCA, but they're dancing together, they're dancing as couples, they're dancing as one big group. There's a story there that I hope that all of you watching that with me, I smiled, I was happy, and plus it was kids, and that I always love when we have young people involved in what we do. But that was a story. Now, the final one is a different kind of story, and it's because it's a poem. And the cool thing about poems is that makes it different from other bardic arts, yet equally as awesome, in my opinion, is that it's written down. And so you can choose to hear it or to read it. Having done a lot of Shakespeare, one thing that I tell people when they ask me how to read Shakespeare, I always say, you have to read it. You can't read a play. You can't read a poem just quietly to yourself. These words only come alive when you hear them spoken. So this next one is, of course, a Shakespeare sonnet. read for us by an awesome English actress. So that's, obviously story. Hello. Um, does that help you understand where I'm coming from, everyone, about Bardic being more than that? Every story is Bardic, and that stories are everything. Anytime you sit there and catch your mom up on what's been going on in your life, you're telling her a story. Anytime you, again, give a speech for work, right? I have a team and I have to give them speeches periodically. When I'm directing plays, I have to give director speeches to my cast. That's a story. And so every time you open your mouth, understand you're telling a story of some kind. And what is your story going to be? It changes, I think, how you look at what you're telling people, what words are even coming out of your mouth at any point in time when you understand it's a story. So that's great. How do you apply this, right? Every story has a theme, and there are 7 major types of stories. And the thing to understand when I tell you these 7 types is that they're not solitary. You can have one or more together in a story. And here's the 7. The first is overcoming the monster, rags to riches, the quest, voyage and return, rebirth, comedy, and tragedy. So when you look at I'm Such a Medieval Theater Dork, so the play Everyman is it's a tragedy, but it's also about rebirth. So you can intermingle your things. You can have, I would never recommend to anyone trying to tell a story to try to have more than 2 of those classic story types in a story. So if you start looking, overcoming the monster. So there's Harry Potter, right? Overcoming the monster is totally Harry Potter, but it's also the quest at the same time. So he's doing both of those, and still it still fits. I have tried to think of other types of stories that don't fit those 7, and they all do. Every single one of them fits somewhere into one of those. I personally think it's really just the 5, and comedy and tragedy sort of go with one of those main 5. So if you're going to write a song, play a song, write a story, write a poem, the first thing you need to think about is, who's your audience? Who are you writing this piece for? I have written a couple of battle songs for the Mid-Realm, one for the East Kingdom. I knew my audience was the people of those kingdoms. I have a story that I wrote that is a battle story, and that story is for people to get ready to fight, whether it's Gulf Wars or Pennsic or whatever. So you have to know who's going to be hearing this performance before you can start to put pen to paper to craft your tale. And again, I'm using tale, but this is a song. This is a vocal song, an instrumental song. This is a dance. This is a poem. This is anything. Once you know who your audience is, the next thing to question is, what do you want to do with them? Right? Where do you want to take this audience to? Where do you want to take them to? What's the adventure that they're supposed to join you on? Right? So Lucas, when you talked about the teacher with the Viking ship and all that stuff, I did read that story. I just didn't remember his name, and it was a really beautiful tale. But he knew, just like Garraed Galbraith knew with, I'm so mangling his last name, I'm so sorry, Garraed, with the veil, he knew exactly where he was going to take us, that he didn't get the girl. He didn't get the woman, but he's still going to wear her veil. But he takes you so masterfully on that song, in the story of that song, that it really hits you out of left field that she's not there. And she's like, wait a minute, she didn't wait, right? He masterfully wrote that song and took us, and we voluntarily jump in with him to go on that adventure. So what adventure do you want to take your audience on? And it could be a happy, it could be sad. Like my stories, most of them do not have happy endings. Hungarians do not seem to do happy endings. That's just the way we are. The next thing to understand about your story is that they have a rhythm. Every good storyteller that you think of, and I'm going to just legit just talk about storytellers. If you think about someone like Garrison Keillor, yes, we're really not happy with who he was in the real world. Okay, fine. But his storytelling had this rhythm that he took you on, and it almost felt like you were breathing at the same time as he was. If you think about some of the great storytellers in the SCA, one of the ones that I always pull out is Mistress Morgana from Norse Shield. She is my inspiration, and she tells these Norse tales that are just like jaw-droppingly stunning. And she takes your hand and leads you on this adventure with her to the point where you're on the edge of your seat and you don't want to breathe so that you don't break that rhythm that she's got going. And so understand too, the rhythm of a story can change. The story can start and then speed up and then slow down. And of course, that's your story arc, which every story has to have. It can also be called a climax. Whoop, wrong thing. I'm sure most of you, I'd like to think most of you have read Stephen King's book, The Stand. Especially right now. I don't know how many of you have been revisiting it. Bad idea. At the beginning of the book, he talks about the book that I have, which is the expanded, like he just put in everything that he wanted to write. Darn you editors for taking out my stuff. And he says, so the story of Hansel and Gretel, right? So there's this dude and his two kids, and this really evil woman comes into their life and marries him, and she doesn't like the kids, so she takes them out to the woods to get lost, but they come home, and so then she's like, so she takes them back to the woods, right? I'm not going to continue, but you get the idea. That's a really bad story, or a really bad rendition of that story. So when the brothers Grimm heard the tale of Hansel and Gretel, they took that tale and made it into a story that I don't know any kid today, even my gamer 14-year-old kid knows the story of Hansel and Gretel. So finding your arc is very, very important, because your audience is giving you their emotions. They're saying, here's my heart. I trust you with my heart. You better take good care of their heart. And if you're going to hurt their heart, like Garraed did with us, love you, Garraed, but that song, The Veil, hurts my heart. And I sing it even louder, of course, after he goes back to his guys. But treat your audience's heart very carefully, because if you hurt them or betray them, they won't like you as a storyteller anymore. That's the thing. You have to view your, I always say to my dependents, it's like a Fabergé egg. That is their heart, right? That is my audience's heart, are these beautiful Fabergé eggs. And I have to be really careful with them because they're so beautiful, and I don't want to mess them up. Personally, now I give content warnings before I perform, because I'll talk a lot about death and really bad things in my stories, and I think that it's polite to my audience now to let them know that bad things are going to happen. You can have more than one arc. You can absolutely have an arc come down and go right back up. I've done it. It works. You just have to time it right. You have to take them up here to this really exciting thing. You got to let them down, let them recover, then take them right back up with you. It's like a roller coaster. It's very awesome. So the final thing to think about when you're telling your story is the thing that anybody who's acted will understand this. You have to have your beginning nailed and your ending nailed. Everything else you can sort of wing, right? You can just wing it while you go, but you have to know how your what's your first 2 sentences. I'll even take one. And what's your last sentence gonna be? As long as you have those bookending your story, you can fill it in with as much as you want. And sometimes I find as a storyteller, when I write my stories, that's where I start. And sometimes I start, wait, I don't know which way you're seeing me, but I start at the end. I don't start at the beginning. I say, I want to take them on this little journey with me, and this is how I'm going to end it. And then I write the story to take me to that ending. Sometimes the ending gets thrown out the window and I have to start again because it doesn't work anymore. The story, as all tales and songs and everything does, it becomes its own thing. But if you have an idea of where you want to take them and where you want to end and where you want to leave them, then the rest should come. So that's it. Questions?
Would you agree that when you do have the situation like you just described, where you have to toss the ending out because it doesn't work, that you should toss that ending out rather than trying to force the story to fit the ending that you originally had? Because there's
yes,
many stories that, like, I personally think that J.K. Rowling did exactly that, because she really wanted certain things to happen. And the story over the course of those 7 books took on a life of its own, and it didn't fit, but she made it fit. And it never seemed right to me.
I agree. I was so disappointed with the ending. Horrid. So I tell this story about, it's called the Liedertje. It's honest to God, a big black rooster vampire. And I had a punchline, but there's young children probably around here, but we all know the other word for a rooster. And so I wanted to end the line, the whole story, with the big black rooster. And I tried and I tried and I tried, and I finally had to just throw it out. And I wrote actually a really scary, spooky vampire story instead. I tried to cram this funny story into being. Then the ending was just like, you just got to let it go. There will be no big black rooster joke allowed in this story. But it's a great point, right? I can now say I had to throw away the most best ending line ever of a story, in my opinion, because it didn't work. Yeah, Lucas.
You brought up Stephen King, and that's kind of where this question comes from. But have you ever used, or do you think it's hacky to warn the audience that this doesn't turf out the way you think? My Stephen King example is he wrote a review of the last book of Harry Potter for Entertainment Weekly, and it was a no spoiler review, and he said there's only one ending to a story, and that's the one the writer has intended. And he brought up the Dark Tower series, which I don't know if you've ever read. But you get to a certain point in the Dark Tower where the major thing happens, all of the characters seem that they're right with the world, but there's a lot of questions unanswered. You turn the page and it's an author's note, and it's Stephen King talking directly to you saying, but that's not good enough, is you? You need to know what happened, don't you? Well, don't keep going if you don't really want to know what happens. And then you go on and you're like, wow, everyone's going to hate that ending, but he stuck to his guns. But what I enjoyed about it was that he gave me this warning, and now I had to know. Right. Even though, and I liked the ending. I mean, I'm one of those people who was like, it wasn't a classic ending of a story. It was actually made it very cyclical. Almost you could go back and start over again with the knowledge that you had and read the whole story with a different perspective. But do you think that, like, in that instance where, like, the ending doesn't quite work or something doesn't quite work, to either start with that in mind or grind it to a halt and address your audience specifically in that case, or what?
Well, so when I tell my story about Bella, I'm giving you an example. So Bela he was a king, and the Mongols came over the mountains and were destroying all of the Hungarian people. And so nobody would help him. So he and his men came and fought them, and they were just totally outnumbered. And one of his men was like, yo, your majesty, give me your armor, give me your banner, and I'm going to go pretend to be you with my men, and then you can escape. And so I build it up, though, in a way so my audience knows. I have them go get the final rites from the priests. And then he donned his armor and he gets ready to go. He and his men get ready to go fight the Mongols. And I say, I bet you think this will have a happy ending. And always the audience goes, yay! And I go, no, we're Hungarian. They were all slaughtered to a man, right? So I let them know when I say that, though, I'm setting you up now to understand what you want, you ain't gonna get. So it's just something to be very careful with, though, and make sure you don't A, use it too much, and B, find the right way to let them down from what they wanted versus what they're getting. Anyone else? We still have some time.
I'll go again.
Okay.
Again, it's like I'm completely novice when it comes to this. I still have not performed for anybody or whatnot. I think in getting to know you, it was something I was like, hey, I wonder if I could do that. But so then we had talked once upon a time about going for what you know and whatnot. Do you find that the popular stories that you try to like tell it really close to what you think people know, or do you try to really find like go far afield of that story? I mean, you know, the SCA, if you're telling stories for people in there, and chances are you're doing something very classic, like a Beowulf or an Arthurian legend or something like that, or you know, one of those kinds of Charlemagne, something like that. Those people probably already know it, or at least have read it or experienced it in some way. How do you play the game between giving them what they expect but putting your own spin on it? Like I know as an actor, when I direct students, like I directed Wizard of Oz, and I said to the actors, I said, listen, I don't want you to do an impression of the people from the movie, but the audience has an expectation when they come in that they want to see a lot of those elements. So let's find that balance or whatnot. Because it was up to me, and I had the budget for it, I would have Tim Burton the hell out of that thing, and it would have been a really twisted version of Wizard of Oz. But no, you know what I mean. At the end of the day, but do you find that maybe for a beginner, it's better to stick closer to the thing or go far afield? What is your advice on that?
I think that nobody ever won anything by being by pulling back, right? So and that's the thing, and part of the thing for everybody here and anybody else who watches this is that I am really accessible. Send me an email and we can set up a Zoom or a Google Hangout and you can work your story with me. I know that I can seem intimidating, but I swear I'm a really big teddy bear. I have found the Hungarians, their stories are really not pleasing to a Western ear. There was one story that I told, and my audience, literally, when I was done, they were like, because our stories don't mesh in any way, shape, or form with what the modern audience in this part of the world wants to hear and thinks they're going to hear. And so they can't. It's like if we were to decide to do a Greek theater the way they did it back then. Everybody would be like, this was the most bizarre evening of my life. I can't believe I spent 25 bucks on these tickets, darling. So you have to understand your audience. And again, that's the first thing. Second thing, who's your audience? Who are you telling them this to? What is the purpose in telling this? If you want to do like what the song The Veil did, and take them to this shift, but he still found his joy. So although it's a bittersweet song, he still ends happy. So just again, Fabergé eggs, be careful with your audience and how you're going to let them down from what they think they're going to get. Anyone else?
You know, Zsof, this is Odette.
Hi, Odette.
This whole thing about now, you're like, now I feel like I want to do a Greek play like the Greeks did, because it is so messed up. Because I was a class 6 major, right? So this whole, I'm like, that would be amazing. But of course, people would hate that. It's also, SCA wise, am like 15th century. So Greeks as the Greeks did it is just not a thing, right?
Right. Yeah, and your audience really, you would have to have a really long speech beforehand, or a really in-depth speech beforehand, explaining to the audience what they were about to see.
This
what
is
they
going to
were
be
about to
really
in.
nerdy.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, in the SCA, we could get away with doing something like that, but you certainly couldn't go to a major theater festival, go to Broadway and see them mount a period Greek tragedy.
That'd be amazing.